So we've got my E55 today, and it has just failed its warrant, which was kind of expected. Bit of a list of things to do, so we're just kind of trying to tick off that list. Luckily, we've actually got access to a hoist and a workshop, so that's really fortunate, thanks to the Alfa Romeo Club and a few really nice people. So right now we're going to change the engine mount, the engine mounts and the transmission mount, and then see if the vibration in the drivetrain goes away, because there's a bit of a vibration through the drive shaft at the moment. So let's go ahead and try and do that. Okay, so the first thing that everyone recommended online was to buy this tool, which is the Mercedes engine mount tool. Now I believe I need the 16mm, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm hoping that it's the 16mm that we are going to use. And this will make your life a lot easier, because then you'll have enough clearance and enough room to actually get to the engine mount bolt. Otherwise it's really hard to get to the top bolt. Alright, so we're just trying to remove the heat shield just on top of the steering rack boot. There's one on each side, and it just makes it a little bit easier to access the engine mount. George is just trying to do that right now on this side, and I'll just show you on this other side what I'm talking about. That's the little shield. You can see the engine mount just up there. So it's actually not too far from the steering rack. It's actually not too bad. Alright, so this is the left-hand engine mount, and you can see all the oil and everything's come out, and it's probably collapsed at the top there as well. So that's why we have to change them, because on a 20-year-old car, most likely it's not so good anymore. Alright, we've got the heat shield out of the way on the left-hand side, and you can see there's a lot more room to get the engine mount out, and it's a lot easier to maneuver, and you don't cut your hand as well. So make sure you take that heat shield off. Okay, so you want to loosen up the bottom bolt, which is the 13mm bolt. You just need a little bit of an extension, and the bolt should be right up there where this hole in the subframe is. Awesome, so we have just tried to put in our little engine mount tool, and you can just see it poking out there. And there's actually quite a bit of room here, so obviously we've got the right tool, because a lot of the tools on eBay are actually quite a bit shorter. But this one looks like it's just the right amount of length for us, which is good. And what you need is lots of extensions, so we're going to try and use lots of extensions to get to it. And then you basically just connect your 3/8 extensions to that little star on the end of the tool, and then you can just turn it and loosen up the top bolt. So luckily we've got a transmission jack, which we're going to use to support the engine. We're just going to support it through the oil sump, and that just makes sure that we can actually lift the engine up a little bit to get the engine mount out. Show the bolt? No, the other side. Yep. And where's the tool? We should actually show the tool. Alright everyone, so now we've got the heat shield and the bolts off from the top of the engine mount, so you can see how the tool fits into the bolt, and how you can actually get a little bit of extra space just with that tool. Otherwise, I think you probably could do it with a normal spanner, but it's just a lot harder, so I definitely recommend getting this tool just in case. And yeah, you want to make sure it's orientated the right way, because it is a little bit offset as well. In the direction, whatever you call it, in the...
Not that way.
Yeah, not that way, okay, so you want to do it that way, right? Because then it points down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Left up on that.
Yeah, okay. There you go, and so now we just have to jack up the engine a little bit and take both engine mounts out. Alright, there we go, that's the old engine mount, which looks pretty horrible. Do not turn it upside down, because as George found out from experience, it actually leaks hydraulic fluid everywhere, which is not very nice. And it smells kind of funny as well. And so that's the new engine mount. It looks like the two engine mounts on either side are actually the same part number, so it looks exactly the same. And that is where it's going to go, right in that little space there. You can see the mounting point for the engine mount, and you can see the little tab that it has to align to as well, right there.
Okay.
Yep, so there's a little tab or a little key to stop it from spinning, and that goes into that little slot at the top there. Alright, what we found was we actually had to jack up the car just a little, okay, so what we found was that we actually had to jack up the engine just a little bit more, because the old mount was actually quite a bit collapsed, and the new mount would not go in even though the old mount came out. So you might have to do that as well, and just open your bonnet as well, because otherwise your engine might hit your bonnet. So I think that's in properly now. We're just gonna do all the bolts for this side, and then we'll do the other side as well. Alright, so we've got the bottom bolts in right there, and just make sure you put some Loctite on the threads there so that it doesn't come loose. And we actually use 25 Newton meters as suggested by some of the posts online for the bottom bolt. Now the top bolt is meant to be 55 Newton meters, but pretty sure you can't really get a torque wrench up there, and even if you try and use the extension, it's going to mess up all your torque settings. So we're just going to do that pretty much as tight as we found it when we got the engine mount off, using the little special tool. And we're going to put thread lock on it as well, so shouldn't really come out at all. So what you want to do is you want to put the top bolts on the engine mount first, and that enables you to just position the engine mount correctly, and then you can wiggle the engine mount to get the bottom bolts in. Bottom bolts are over here like that. Alright, so now that the engine mounts are done, we are now going to move on to the transmission mount, which apparently has also gone bad. Probably the original one, that's why. The transmission mount should be a lot easier, so you just need to support your transmission through the transmission pan, and you undo these 4 bolts down the bottom here on the transmission crossmember, and you undo the 2 bolts holding the mount in place, and then it should just slide out. I've got the new mount here, so it's just one of these things, and as you can see, it's just these 2 bolts, and there's a few bolts down the bottom. We'll have to try and figure that out. Oh yeah, there's a few bolts down the bottom as well. Okay, so there's actually 6 bolts down the bottom and 2 bolts at the top, and that should be all good, and then we should have another thing sorted. Alright, so we've unbolted the transmission mount. It was really easy. You just got to take all the bolts off and it just slides out, so it's pretty straightforward. And there's the little cross member for holding the transmission in. You can tell that there's a bit of wear on this transmission mount, but it's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I can see that this is the original Merc one, because there's a Merc stamp on there. I think on the other side, sorry. Yeah, I think on the other side there's the Merc. There it is. There's a Merc stamp right there. And the shape is a little bit different to the new one as well, so even though it's probably okay, we're just going to change it out anyway, because might as well. We've got the part here and it's not too expensive. And now we just need to bolt it all back into the crossmember and then put it back into the transmission. Oh, and we want to use some Loctite as well, because there's quite a bit of Loctite on these bolts. I'll tell you what the torque settings are just in a second. Alright, so we're just reinstalling all the bolts. We decided just to Loctite everything because we might as well, and it's only a very little bit, so it's all good. Do these ones here. Sweet. Okay, so we've tightened everything up. These 4 bolts on the bottom here that mount the bracket onto the chassis, those are 40 foot-pounds, or around about 54 Newton meters. These little bolts are 25 foot-pounds, or around about 34 Newton meters, I think it was. And then these top ones that actually go into the transmission are 30 foot-pounds, which is around 41 Newton meters. Alright, so everything's been done up really tight and made sure it's all to the right spec. And what we actually found was this side was actually quite loose. All these bolts were loose, so we're hoping that perhaps just tightening this up actually solves some of the vibration that we're getting through the drivetrain, but we'll have to wait and see. There has been some suggestion that we might have to look at the center bearing, which is over here just behind the exhaust there. But before we do all of that, let's just do all the basic stuff first. Everything that needs to be done first, and then we can start digging into the drivetrain a little bit further. Now the drive shaft looks like it's already been looked at because it's quite new and it looks pretty fresh, and there's quite a few markings on it, so it seems like someone's already had it off before to try and resolve some of these issues. So we'll have to wait and see. But for now, the engine mounts and the transmission mount has all been refreshed, and that should make a pretty big difference to the way the car runs and drives. We'll be doing a little bit more while the car is up here on the hoist. So we've got control arm bushes, we've got tie rods, we've got track rod ends, we've got what else? Drop links, Pretty much everything on the suspension we're going to change as well. So stay tuned and catch you next episode.